Hello and welcome to Chapter 4, Section 4.3 on Using Studies Wisely. We only have two learning objectives in this section, and one is to describe the scope of inference that is appropriate. So again, we'll be looking at the word inference, and then we'll also spend just a little bit of time on valuing whether a statistical study has been carried out in an ethical manner. Now, this little asterisk means that this is an optional section. This is not, that material on day 2 will not be on the AP exam. But I think it's important. I think it's important that we cover it because we should always keep in mind our ethics. So this is a really good chart that you'll refer back to on occasion. And to help you answer the question, what type of inference can be made from a particular study? Well, it depends on the design of the study. All right. So, first thing we always do, in some cases, we are randomly, our individuals are randomly selected from the population. If they were volunteers, it'd be a no. If we were blocking, that'd be a no as well too, more than likely. We'd have to read across these different ways, and then also look at, once we have those individuals, were they randomly assigned to groups, okay? Or were they blocked? Were they simply put into groups? This block here is the most powerful. Okay? That's where we do have random selection and random assignment. So again, when you have random selection, randomly selected people from the population, and then randomly assigned them to groups, that is so good. That is the best type of experimental design that we can have, because we can both make an inference about the population, and we can establish cause and effect. Now, if our individuals are randomly selected, but we did not put them into groups randomly. We can't make an assumption about the population then. We can't make an inference about the population, but we can establish cause and effect. So again, if you want to establish cause and effect, you want to make sure you randomly select the people from the population. The other box would be if we were randomly selecting people from the population, but we didn't put them didn't randomly assign them into groups. So generally that's kind of some blocking situations. So we certainly could make inferences about the population, but we couldn't establish a cause and effect. And then the last thing, probably want to try to avoid this when possible, because again, you don't randomly select people and you're not randomly put them into groups. It's a really poor design. And then you can't make any inference about the population and you can't establish cause and effect. Okay. Well-designed experiments randomly assign individuals to treatment groups. Okay. So we do randomly assign people to the treatment groups. However, most experiments don't select experimental units at random. We do this a lot. We can kind of control that. This over here gets to be hard to do, to randomly select people from the population, especially if our population is quite large, like the state of Minnesota or the United States. So a lot of times we have limits on that with just time and money. Okay. So observational studies don't randomly assign individual to groups, which rules out inference about cause and effect. So we're not assigning them to groups. We can't establish cause and effect. So observational studies cannot establish cause and effect. But observational studies that use random sampling, we can make inferences about the population. So we can have that situation. So as you see, there are some challenges to establishing causation. You got to have a well-designed experiment. Okay, where you both have random selection and random assignment. Okay. A well-designed experiment tells us that changes in the explanatory variable cause changes in the response variable. Okay? Lack of realism can limit our ability to apply the conclusions of an experiment to the settings of greatest interest. In other words, when we talk about lack of realism, we'll have situations where we maybe do studies on mice, and then we're trying to make that jump to the human population too. So that's simply a lack of realism that it's not real to say what happens in mice happens in humans. And then in some cases, it isn't practical or ethical to do an experiment. Okay? You certainly wouldn't want to do an experiment that asks, does texting while driving increase the risk of having an accident? Well, we're not going to set up an experiment and have people go out and tell them to go out and text and drive. And then have another group go out and tell them, no, don't text and drive, and let's compare the results and see what happens. You're putting people in danger. You don't want to do that, obviously. Other questions like, does going to church regularly help people live longer? I just want to kind of be careful about some more sensitive topics about going to church. Avoid some kind of religious entanglements as well. And then, does smoking cause lung cancer? Well, again, just like the texting and driving, we're not going to make people smoke and see if they get lung cancer or not. There's certain things that we just don't do. What I will do is I will also show you the video, and I would highly encourage you, if you are taking advantage of the flexible learning spaces, to look up the Milgram experiment. It's a really good example of why we have ethical boards, and make sure we aren't harming people. So, lastly, it is sometimes possible to build a strong case for causation in the absence of experiments by considering data from observational studies. So it is possible, but again, we'd rather have an experiment, but absent of being practical or ethical, you probably would have to do an observational study. All right. So, to do that observational study when we can't do an experiment for a variety of reasons, either too expensive, too time-consuming, unethical, not practical, this is the following criteria we would use to establish causation. Each of these 4 bullet points must be established. We must have a strong association. Must have a very strong R value. So an R value that is very close to -1 or 1. We want to establish that the association is consistent. That if we continue to do this experiment over and over and over and over and over again, we continue to see the same results over and over and over and over again. Here, larger values of the explanatory variables. In other words, if we take more and more samples from an explanatory variable, that we get a stronger response variable. So in other words, as we take more and more explanatory variables, our association gets closer and closer to 1 or -1, depending on the association. And this kind of makes sense if you're trying to show cause and effect, that the cause does precede the effect in time. That somebody smoked before they got lung cancer, not that they had lung cancer and then started smoking. And then it is plausible. That does make sense that, hey, if you're inhaling something, you might be doing some damage to your lungs. So that it is plausible. It is, you can see that, that might be simply a cause of that. Okay. We'll talk about data ethics here. This is kind of the optional lesson, and kind of our day 2 piece from section 4.3. So instead of making a separate video, I'm just going to kind of keep talking about it as we go into this section here. So simply, complex issues of data ethics arise when we collect data from people. We don't want to harm people, both physically and emotionally. So here are some basic standards of data ethics that must be obeyed, right, when you gather data from human subjects. Either observational studies, but more importantly, experiments, because that's where you're interacting with people. Right? So generally, when you're doing a study, through a business or your job or through school, there's what's called an institutional review board. And they are the ones that are charged with protecting the safety and well-being of the subjects. If you are going to do a study that involves subjects, that involves humans, your company, your school will have a review board that will look through what you're doing and generally give you an okay or a limited okay or a no, we will not allow you to do that. So all individuals who are subjects in a study must be given their informed consent, which then sort of kind of takes away a little bit from an experiment, because now people, if you're trying to do something and not influence them or introduce bias, you may not want to be telling them what you're doing. But there's ways to kind of not tell them what you're doing, but still protect them, that they're going to be part of an experiment. They may not necessarily know, but that you're guaranteeing them that they're not going to be harmed. So you would be giving them, asking for their informed consent, asking for basically a waiver before you collect any data. All right. And then again, you must keep the data confidential. You wouldn't want that results to come out from a drug study and have information about a certain person and what may have happened to them. Again, we want to make sure we protect the privacy and the rights of individuals. So only the summaries for the groups may be made public. And keep absent the names. Okay, so this is what Section 4.3 was about. Is you should be able to describe the scope of inference that is appropriate and whether it's just a study has been carried out in an ethical manner. Okay, that is it for Chapter 4. And on the assignment sheet, Day 1 from 4.3 was numbers 83, 87 through 94, 97 through 104. And then if you look at the data ethics piece, which is sort of our Day 2, there isn't any specific homework on that. So what we can do is we can start slowly moving into our review exercises for Chapter 4 and getting ourselves ready for the Chapter 4 test. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Hope it's been a great Chapter 4 for you, and we'll see you in Chapter 5.